Hello chess friends and welcome to that of chat channel and welcome back to our Danish Gambit series. So in this series we're covering this very aggressive opening from white and from black's perspective, and today we're analyzing the so-called Schlechter defense against the Danish Gambit setup that white is preparing. Of course, the Danish Gambit is very aggressive and basically there's no good way to avoid it. I think you should accept the Danish Gambit, but then you could face of course some tactical problems, and the Schlechter defense is actually one of the best ways to equalize the game in an early stage of the game. So that's why you can use basically the Schlechter defense to get into a very drawish line. In my opinion, there are better ways to play against the Danish Gambit than the Schlechter defense. But as I said, if you don't want to complicate things too much, you can use the Schlechter defense and then, as I said, have at least an equal game from an early stage of the game. The good part of this Schlechter defense that you're also trading off the queens in an early stage of the game. So that's why the game becomes more and more simplified. And then maybe you can rely simply on your minor piece activity. And as I said, at least make it raw from black's perspective. But okay, there are many lines, there are many sidelines. As I said, the Schlechter defense is maybe not the best of ways to face the Danish Gambit. There are more aggressive ways from black's perspective to play against the Danish. We'll analyze them too, but let's check out now what's the main idea of the Schlechter defense. So here e4, and after e5, d4, and as I said, there is simply no good way, I think, to escape from white's plan. You have to basically, I think, accept here white's game. You have to accept the Danish Gambit setup after e takes d4, c3. Still, my recommendation is simply to take d takes c3. And now after bishop to c4, we have analyzed also in my previous videos this particular lines. Now we should, I think, simply take. We have c takes b2. After bishop to b2, now comes the common Schlechter defense move, and it's the move d5. And the move d5 is basically sort of a liberating line for black. There are better ways. The engine, for instance, suggests something like knight to f6. We'll analyze this lines too. So it's the classical defense. I think it's simply the best way to beat the Danish Gambit. But okay, here we're facing now the move d5, and at least this move d5 is a forcing move. It's an attacking move, and I think black has solved some of these tactical problems because white needs to react. If you play e takes d5, it's not so good, I think, because first of all, what we can notice in the Danish Gambit, the main goal of white is simply this bishop's activity on both of these diagonals. And with the move e takes d5, at least we have paralyzed one of this bishop. The bishop on c4 is now blocked out by its own pawn. So that's why you should not recapture here from white's perspective with the e pawn. You should recapture with the bishop. And also the e file is open, so even black can try some ideas of queen to e7 in order maybe to simplify the game after queen to e2, as said, maybe to trade off the queens. And as I said, when the queens are off the board, then the game is not so tactical, then the game is not so dangerous, then I think you can have some great chances even to win the game from black's perspective. So that's why white needs, I think, here to take out with the bishop to d5, and now comes the main Schlechter defense move. It's the move knight to f6, because this knight is attacking, of course, the bishop, and with this idea, by decoying the bishop to d5, we are trying now to attack the bishop. We want to take it out. Then going into simplified line again, you don't want to take, of course, this knight with your very active bishop on b2, so taking out here is not an option. But the actual idea of white now is to deflect the king from the defense of the queen, bishop to f7. But you shouldn't worry here from black's perspective. Nothing went wrong here. It's still playable, because after bishop to f7, king to f7, queen to d8, and now you have also this check. The queen is attacked, so that's why the queen has to retreat now. And now after bishop to d2, we have now reached the common Schlechter defense, I think, position in which both players have equal chances. And as I said, at least in this line, black is defended by trading off the queens, by simplifying the game. The game is not so tactical anymore, but I still think that you should know more couple moves that you should make here from black's perspective after rook to e8 and maybe something like f3. My recommendation is now simply to develop the minor pieces. Don't expose yourself here with black with some moves as c5 or b5 or something like a5. Leave the pawns, for instance, like this. Leave them at least for a while like this. You'll have time to push pawns on the queen side, because we're trying, of course, to attack here the position using our pawn majority. It means we have now this 3 versus 1 situation on the queen side, so that's the side that we're attacking. But still, I would be patient here. first developing the minor pieces, like in one particular game that I wanted to show you, black did here. Mikhail Sheremet against Maxim Aronov. Here black simply developed the minor piece, no problem. Knight to e2, bishop to d7 castling, and now in this position both players agreed to draw. Okay, there are maybe now some good opportunities for white, there are maybe some good opportunities for black, but I still think we can agree that without the queens on the board, the position is more and more simplified. Black has defended this position. Black maybe can try to find some good squares for knight, knight to e4, knight to c4, maybe if it's possible here, and then trying to push c5, b5, a5 if the position allows it here, simply using a pawn majority. The good thing, I think, even in this position for black here is if white tries now a pawn majority attack on the king side by using this 4 versus 2 situation here, 4 versus 2. The good thing is that actually you have the king there, and the king can be used also as a good defensive piece, as a good counter-attack piece. So the king is not so in danger. So that's why the king can play, I think, in this position much more actively. So that's why I think using the pawn majority on the queen side here is perfectly fine. But still, as I said, my recommendation is simply to first develop the minor pieces, not pushing the pawns immediately, because I think you have to counterplay some ideas of white. White will also try some ideas of knight to d4, maybe knight to f5, knight to d4, knight to b5. So first battling with the minor pieces and then pushing the pawn. So let's see now another example. It's a great gameplay by Leonid Kritz against Kim Pilgaard. It's also in the common Danish Gambit line. So d4, c3, bishop to c4. We have now c takes b2, bishop to b2, and now again the Schlechter defense with d5, bishop to d5, knight to f6, and now again this line. I think this line you have to memorize. This line will happen to you many times. And for king to f7, here bishop to b4, again the same setup, knight to d2, and now again rook to e8. Here white tried to move knight to f3. The move knight to f3 is very tricky because white probably hoped here for this move, knight to e4, but actually it would be a huge mistake because you get this intermediate check with knight to e5, and then you lose, of course, the connection between the knight and the rook, and you basically have to give up, I think, the rook for the exchange for the knight, and white is much better. So that's why here after the move knight to f3, black tried now the move c5. Okay, as we said, maybe here, as we said, knight to c6, again simply slightly better, getting simply our pieces into the game, getting our bishop maybe somewhere here to e6, or maybe something like knight to a4, maybe knight to a5, knight to c4 is an opportunity. So I think you have to compete here immediately for the d4 square. The d4 square is something I think that we have to protect immediately, because if the knight comes on d4, then as we said, knight to b5 I don't like, then the c7 could be weak. So here after knight to c6, maybe castling, bishop to g4 is also great opportunity here, rook to c1, rook to d8, and I think black has a decent position. When we get challenged, maybe we can even give up the bishop for a knight, and then trying, as I said, maybe to attack here further the e4 pawn. But okay, in the game c5 was played. Here we have knight to e5, we have king to g8, and you see the king is perfectly fine here. Black's king is not in danger, the queens are off the board, and that's actually the main goal of the Schlechter defense, getting the queens off the board. The position is not so tactical, not so dramatic. I think the game becomes more and more simplified. After the move knight to e5, here f4 was played, knight to d7 castling, knight takes e5, bishop to e5, and we have now reached a position, again equal chances for both sides, because these are opposite colored bishops. You see, if we of course maybe even further trade more pieces, if the knights are off the board, if the rooks are maybe off the board, if you could just imagine this position without the knights, without the rooks on the board, then it's of course an opposite colored bishop's endgame, and this should be probably a draw. So as I said, the Schlechter defense, in my opinion, is a good weapon if you want to equalize the game from an early stage of the game. But if you want to win games, there are better ways to play as black. There are sharper lines, there are more aggressive lines. Here after move b6, white right, rook to f3, here bishop to b7. Here you cannot actually take, knight takes e4 would be very risky. After knight takes e4, bishop to e4, then rook to g7 could be a problem. Then you lose, you have some tactical problems, so of course on the 7th rank. So after the move rook to g3, king to f7, knight to c4 was played. We have rook to d8, and now bishop to f6, g takes f6, and now this is a very nice move here by white. e5 now after rook to rook to e7, we have knight to d6, and actually white has here a powerful knight. I don't want to show you now the whole game. White won the game. The game will be in the description below. Maybe you can analyze the game for yourself, but actually what we studied here, I think, is this particular line after bishop to d5, knight to f6, bishop to f7. Don't worry, nothing went wrong here for black. King to f7, queen takes d8, bishop to b4, queen to d2, and now knight to d2 is an equal game for both sides. So as I said, in the continuation of the Danish Gambit, we'll analyze some better ways for black, because the Danish Gambit is a risky choice of whites. It's similar to the King's Gambit, where when it comes to computer evaluation, white is giving a slightly edge to black, but of course you have to then to defend its position. So as I said, the Schlechter defense is perfectly fine if you don't want to complicate things too much, if you want to get an equal game. So okay, I hope that you realize these ideas, and I hope that you enjoy this video. If you want to study the Danish Gambit more, please check out my Danish Gambit series so far, with a great gameplay by Stockfish against Lila C0, and also some other lines that we have analyzed so far in this series. If you have trouble maybe to play as black, check out my hyper accelerated Dragon Sicilian defense series as a good response to e4. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Stay tuned with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.